Hello, I'm your host of today's What Do You Do in Colorado podcast. I am Derek Perez here with a special guest and good friend, Sean Bulaya.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. Anyways, hello everyone, and welcome to What Do You Do in Colorado? Today we'll be discussing the significance of the story There Will Come Soft Rains.
What were your views on this story? I honestly found it quite foreboding, quite ominous,
Yeah,
considering its time.
when was the story written again? It was like after World War II, right?
After World War II, and one of the first instances of nuclear bombings.
Yeah, it was a really interesting take on the future for what's time, and liked to see how it's developed over these past few years, probably.
Definitely. I'm excited to see where it goes.
I mean,
Not
tech,
the fate of humanity, of course.
yeah, I mean, technology is advancing at such a rate that maybe these things will exist in our time.
Now, I feel that There Will Come Soft Rains is significant since it portrays to the warning of our future, as stated earlier. Desolation has taken over without much of a chance for survival in the story. There are buildings left in ruin around the main area, and that house is all that is left. All the effects of war and destruction caused by mankind has been left, and humanity, as a result, has been left to wither away and die out in this story. All forms of natural life, it seems.
Yeah, throughout the story, it's the emphasis on everything being so robotic. There's emotion added to it, giving traits that usually humans would have, but surely they're just machines. And like the one living thing we see is a dog. The dog is the last living thing of humanity left. As it states in section 17, a dog whined, shivering on the front porch. The front door recognized the dog's voice and opened. The dog, once huge and fleshy, but now gone to bone and covered with sores, moved in and through the house, tracking mud. Behind it were angry mice, angry at having to pick up mud, angry at inconvenience. You see, like the mice, they're giving this human emotion, but as they were first introduced to the story, they're just machines built to clean. Why would they be mad at the task they were built to do?
It's definitely a good point, and I see what you mean there. Perhaps it's one of the first signs that this new world seems to be a world of machinery or not, seems to be much more pleased with the lack of life, a routine to follow, and a routine unobscured by life. And now that routine is, well, cleared up due to the lack of such.
I guess humanity that has infected the world as a whole. It's like seeing it through our industrial revolutions, and how cities have been built, how land has been taken. It's the development of society as a whole.
On page 115, there's
Yeah,
a poem, a song that is spoken out by the AI's voice of the house. There will come soft rains and the smell of the ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and frogs in the pools singing at night, and wild plum trees in tremulous white. Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their whims on a low fence wire, and not one will know of the war, not one will care at last when it is done. No one would mind, neither bird nor tree, if mankind perished utterly. And spring herself, when she woke at dawn, would scarcely know that we were gone. The house seems to be self aware of such a reality. Whether it is down to number generations in the AI or not, it still leaves that very haunting message that
yeah,
perhaps from the bombings, that humanity was only left as a burning, fading memory in the world's ashes.
I do think that is odd. It's as if the house itself, as you said, it's self aware, it knows what happened. It's basically just restating all the events, and as you can see in the story, that everything, life, time isn't after us. It goes on, it continues. It doesn't need humanity to drive, and it's not even based on all of us. It's there, always moving, always going forward, always continuing, nonstop.
That unfortunate point still stands, though. Time moves on. whether we would like it to or not. These nuclear bombings, I think if you remember, during the first nuclear bombings of Hiroshima,
Yeah.
there were figures left behind, silhouettes of the people that were hit by the bombings.
Oh
They were
yeah.
left as little ashen marks, little markings in the ground that somewhat resemble what happened beforehand. The moments spent prior to such an unforeseen incident. And perhaps this one story, this very moment in the story, where there are photos of the family that resided, perhaps they are the counterpart to such silhouettes.
There's aspects from the actual events that happened in this story, such as the still frames of people living their lives without like a care for the world, not understanding of what truly happened in that moment, as they were just gone in an instant, and all that remains of them is just a silhouette left there. That and it just represents what was once, as you said, a fading memory.
It's quite haunting to know that this story was made as kind of a sci fi future reality. Made back during what, the 1950s, 1960s.
Yeah, around that.
And now, with each year, with each month, even a decade that goes by, tensions rise, and it's a foreboding sign for all of humanity that if we don't stop where we are, if we don't slow our roll, perhaps this is the direction that things will go in. And it's a direction that I don't believe anybody could want. Not upon their worst enemy, or not upon their greatest friend.
Imagine if there even was like one person left in this one world, the world that's filled with desolation, destruction. Everything is gone. What's even left for them? They can't. They can't start a new whole life. Everything is gone, and they're the only thing left.
Going back to that dog from earlier that you mentioned,
Yeah.
the dog that had sputtered out of life, perhaps that dog was a very loose resemblance of humanity and the life that had been in such an area. Because if you remember, the nuclear bombs were specified, or at least the area that was emptied of life was somewhere in California.
I believe so.
And
Yes.
yeah, perhaps there were more bombings, and this was a focus on an area. Perhaps this dog had walked through other places that were just as torn apart by the effects of radiation and the inhabitants of the area, the lack of inhabitants. Perhaps that is a sign of humanity's last will to fight during such a time being slowly dwindled out and foamed away, as the dog had before dying.
Exactly. How it could all just happen in an instant. Uh, the dog just dies. As it states, the dog frothed at the mouth, lying at the door, sniffing. Its eyes turned to fire. It ran wildly in circles, biting at its tail, spun in a frenzy, and died. It laid in the parlor for an hour. How it just dies, how it just perishes. It just shows how quick of an action it was.
Another connection that's made there is that the dog seems, I don't know if you noticed it, but in the mechanical and clean settings of the home, the dog is almost out of place, is it not?
That's
In
true.
comparison, compared to the cleanliness of the mice that work there, robotic or not, well, definitely robotic. And the home, the interior, all organized, it seems out of place. It's kind of as if an intruder was not allowed there. And humanity's advancements, those improvements, those advancements
Th-
seemed like an intruder.
Seems that the those have become the norm compared to what used to be normal for us. Just living your life in
Oh.
general. How we've been outlived by our own inventions, our own creations, machines. It just shows that maybe one day we might lead to our own downfall.
And on possibly a final footnote, something that I noticed towards the end. If you remember, the house lit a flame.
Oh,
It was
yes,
quite a
that's true.
fire. And
There was a huge fire that just demolished the house as a whole, and the house itself, it seemed as if it was trying to defend itself from the fire.
something that could come of that is no matter how neat, no matter how organized something may be, It is unable to, well, fully avoid the downfall that everything faces eventually. Prolonging it, yes, but facing it at the end of the day is inevitable for that house. The house was doomed to become like the buildings surrounding it, ruins, figures of the past. It won't remain. Even its own organization caught up to it. And eventually, all that stood was one wall, a single wall that
Today
repeated
is
a
August
message.
5th,
And that's all it will
2026.
do till the
Today is August 5th,
inevitable end of that
2026.
wall as well.
Today is August 5th,
Everything has an end to it,
2026.
and humanity is,
Today is August
unfortunately,
5th.
seems to be one of them as well. Anyways, that's all we have for this short but fortunate 10 minutes. I hope that there's a future project which calls for what do you do in Colorado again, as this was a great podcast, and I think it would be better if we could do it again. Probably have more time.
Definitely. Though it was a lot of fun to perform in, and I loved talking here. Thank you for your time, Shaun.
Hey, you never answered that question. What do you do in Colorado?